The prolonged use of handcuffs is a means of torture, according to defense lawyer in the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial, Sipho Ramosepele. He's described the circumstances surrounding the arrest of accused number 1, Muzi Sibiya. In his testimony, Sibiya described how he was allegedly assaulted and forced to sign a pre-written confession statement implicating himself in the footballer's murder. The High Court in Pretoria is hearing closing arguments in the trial within a trial.
Accused number 1 is arrested in Tembisa at around 1:30 on the 30th of May, 1:30 p.m. on the 30th of May 2020. There and then he's handcuffed, and the police officers make sure from then that the handcuffs are tightly squeezed around the wrist of accused number 1. At the time he is presented to Mboto at 21:45 p.m. on the 30th, he has been in those tightly squeezed handcuffs for 8 hours plus. And there's a reason why Mboto says, I loosen them up. He's a police officer. You can see these handcuffs are causing injury, harm, damage to accused number 1. So my submission is that Colonel Mboto, as a police officer, he's minimizing the injuries that he actually observed, because accused number 1 says, my hands were swollen and I was bleeding from my hands. It was not a little bit, it was not little bits of droplets of blood. And my Lord, I'm going to ask the court to take judicial notice of jurisprudence that emanates from the UN regarding the use of handcuffs as a means of torture. And literature says the prolonged use of handcuffs and other restraints is a means of torture. I don't have to be accused number 1 to imagine the excruciating pain when your body is only leveraged. You are lifted up with the handcuffs at your back. And that happened at Tembisa, according to accused number 1, twice, because first time, all 3 of them, the 2 gentlemen that he was with, they were made to lay down. Then they picked accused number 1 up. Who are you? I'm Muzi Sibiya. I'm from Kwamatabatini. Lay him down. Pick these ones up. They are not restrained. Whatever happened to them happens to them. He goes on the ground for the second time again. He's leveraged, lifted up with those handcuffs with his hands at the back. So from there, assault and torture in this manner, it is my submission, my Lord, begins.
Well, as you know by now, Mnisi has been following proceedings, and he joins us in, I was about to say you're joining us in court, but no, you're joining us in studio, Linda. It's great to see you. Thanks for coming on. And quite a picture being painted by the defense lawyer there about the alleged torture that his client went through. That picture being painted of him being handcuffed with his hands behind his back and being lifted then, his entire body weight being lifted. It would have been interesting and perhaps better to actually hear it in the trial within a trial and not only in the closing arguments.
Yeah, you know, Michelle, and what is important about what he's saying is because it then takes us back to the grounds of objection. Why were they objecting to the admissibility of these confession statements? Their story in the beginning was quite unclear, and that is why, he then says at the beginning of his arguments that he wants to clarify the actual grounds for objection, and he's citing torture. And if you recall, last week the judge even asked Mgomezulu about what exactly happened. Are you saying that he was assaulted to talk, or were they assaulted to sign the documents? And that's where the issue has always been. And this is somewhat of an argument that they're making in supplementing basically the evidence that they've already used in the main trial. And they're saying that because of this torture, the confession statements cannot, be admitted. The state, just before, I came into studio, was arguing during its reply the link between the torture and the submission or the confession statements that were made. So it was important that they draw the picture to the court because one of the things that are challenging about the defense's case are the many versions around what exactly could have happened, particularly when you also look at the issue around accused number 2's confession before Magistrate Cronje. The lawyer, the disputed lawyer that was there, initially it was he wasn't there, he wasn't represented, and in arguments we're hearing that he played a passive role. So the question again is, was he there or was he not there? The argument that is submitted by Sipho Ramosepele is that he did not have a mandate. So already you can tell there are different kinds of versions that are being put to the court, but an important one that is being drawn by Ramosepele there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's alleged torture, right? It's alleged assault. How does the defense now go about to prove that? And I suppose you talked about the state now summing up its arguments, its closing arguments. That will probably be one of the key points that the state does put forward to the court as well.
Yeah, in fact, that's what they're telling the court, that so far, with the allegations of torture, the allegations of assault, the defense has not provided any proof to that. They go back to the evidence that they laid around the dentist, for example, who came and reported that there were no abnormalities when he did that checkup of the accused person that had been brought, Moanitans that had been brought to him. They also cite, other evidence to say, for example, pictures that were taken of accused number 1. And what the defense is saying today in their closing arguments, particularly related to the pictures, is that they were blurry, they did not serve their intended purposes because there were no close-ups of the accused person. And the judge asking a question, was that put to the person who took these pictures, who came to the stand to testify? They say, well, it was not, but they're arguing that those pictures did not serve the intended purpose. So the defense took about, 2 days to sum up its closing arguments. Might we have a decision this week in this trial within a trial, Linda? Looking at where we are, Michelle, I can tell you that we might possibly get a judgment this week. And also looking at how eager the judge has been to fast-track the issues. I mean, just yesterday I was counting the number of witnesses that have been called in the trial, within a trial itself, and it's around 14 witnesses. And if you look at the time when it started around October last year. Gosh. So there is, of course, that desperate, need or that desperate desire, particularly when you look at the people that have interest in this case, the families that are involved, to go back to the main trial. Absolutely. Because the confessions just form a small piece of the puzzle in the state's case. I mean, in the main trial, they've called over 28 witnesses, I think 29 witnesses in the main trial, and are likely to continue. So the longer we take in the trial within a trial, the longer it will take to wrap up the main trial, because we still have witnesses that will come and testify in the state's case, and at the end of that, we still have the defense who still has to now open its case, depending on what they decide to do, of course. Yeah, absolutely. And I would argue not just the family members or interested parties, I would argue the country is looking for this trial to get underway. Linda Mnisi, thanks very much indeed for coming into studio. Of course, Linda's keeping a close eye on what's unfolding in the High Court in Pretoria.